Welcome to the How to Do Your 20s podcast. I'm your host, Travis Marziani. I, like most 20-somethings, spent the first 18 years of my life working my ass off to get into a good college. I got into my dream college and spent the next few years working towards getting a good job, because that's what society said I should do. I did end up getting a good job where I was able to save up some money, but after 2 years in the corporate world, I realized I was completely unsatisfied with my life, and I didn't want to spend the next 40 years in the prison that is 9-to-5 life. So I quit my job so I could start my own online business, travel the world, and live life under my own terms. I'm not special, and I wasn't born rich, but I, like you, happen to be living in the greatest time in human history. There's an insane amount of opportunities out there, and hopefully this show will help you capitalize on some of them. Now, this isn't a fluffy, feel-good, follow your passion type of show. Instead, I try to focus on real, practical information that can help both you and me live a better life right now. So let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the How to Do Your 20s podcast. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about writing, and specifically fast draft writing. And I have an author on who actually usually writes under a pseudonym, so he does not release his name for his actual books, but his name's Matt Morris. And one of the things that really interested me about him is he wrote 50,000 words in one day. And for those people that don't know, that's about a book in one day. And that was for NaNoWriMo, which is National Writers Month. And it's a competition where you're supposed to write 50,000 words in a month. So that was really quite an accomplishment. But another thing that I really liked about Matt is he was actually an accountant for 6 years. He quit his corporate job to follow his dream of writing. So, Matt, first question, I guess, what made you decide to quit your corporate job?
Hey, Travis. Thanks for that introduction. It's, writing has always been a big, important part of my life. I've always kind of liked the arts. I play guitar. I've always liked writing. I've journaled. And really back in 2011, I just kind of... I can't remember how I found it. I was just on a website and someone mentioned someone by the name of Amanda Hocking, who back then she hit it really big with self-publishing. And so I kind of looked into it a little bit, this whole self-publishing thing, and realized that, it's obvious now, but with the advent of the internet and with connecting people digitally, that really writers could hit a market without going through any of the middlemen. And so it just appealed to me on multiple levels. I have a business background, and running it like a business and kind of being your own business, that appealed to me. I've always wanted to own my own business. And then it appealed to me on that front, and also appealed to me on the front of I've always enjoyed writing. I've always enjoyed reading. I've always been a creative person. So it really just kind of hit on all of the things that were important in my life. And so it made sense. It didn't make sense to do anything else.
So I know you studied accounting in college. How come you didn't study writing in college?
Really, I actually started off when I went to the University of Arizona, and my freshman year, I actually majored in piano performance. And during that year, I was kind of trying to find myself, and I realized I didn't like playing piano, and so I started playing guitar. Then I realized that I didn't like being told what to play, and I kind of just wanted to pursue it on my own. And the other part of it was when I got out of college, I wanted job security. Mm-hmm. So frankly, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and going into business, getting a business degree in general just made sense. And then I was always drawn towards, either accounting or finance, and accounting seemed, if I were going to get a degree in one of them, accounting seemed the more important one to get the degree in, because of the certifications involved after the fact. To get a CPA, you need that degree really. And versus if I wanted to go into finance, I could transition into finance out of accounting. And so that's really what narrowed that decision down for me. And I was very good at it. I had a 4.0 accounting GPA, and it came naturally to me. So I just kind of went with it. And I knew that it was always going to be a very nice security net for whatever I wanted to do in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I actually just recently read a book, and I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called, I think it's a flat Earth, or a whole new Earth. No, a whole new flat Earth. What is it? No, a flat Earth. That's what it is. And it is basically about like how outsourcing and technology is making a lot of jobs starting to become obsolete. And one of the big ones it talked about was how accounting's taking a big hit, because now a lot of people overseas are starting to do accounting, and a lot of computer programs can kind of do a lot of the accounting stuff automatically, which I found really interesting because accounting for, 100 years or whatever has been a very stable and important job, but it looks like it's slowly kind of deteriorating because it's outsourceable. So I just wanted to throw that random side note in.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where you see that happening a lot in various industries, and there's always going to be a niche for people to do whatever they want to do. Accounting is always going to have certain niches that won't be able to be outsourced, just like anything else. But for the most part, I definitely resonate with that, and I totally agree that there's shuffling going on, but that shuffling creates new opportunities, and people just need to be willing to take a risk and leap at those opportunities when they see them.
Absolutely. So let's jump into it and actually talk about how you can do some fast drafting. Like, what is the first step of the process? Let's say I want to write a book, and I know I've wanted to write this book for a year, but I just never got myself to do it. How do I sit down and write 50,000 words?
Sure, Travis. Yeah, and one of the big things that I actually advise doing, and I'm going to advise, I'm going to recommend a book to you and all your listeners right now. It's a book by Rachel Aaron. That's Aaron, and the book is called 2K to 10K. And she talks about she's a traditionally published author. She talks about going from writing 2,000 words a day to 10,000 words a day. And she gives a lot of tips in there, and I'll probably end up regurgitating a few of them because I since reading her book, I've followed a lot of her methods, but I wanted to throw that out there. It's 99 cents on Amazon. I highly recommend anybody who wants to be a writer to go check that book out. With that said, one of the biggest things that I recommend doing to anyone who wants to write is, number one, find something that you're passionate about, because enthusiasm and passion, that's going to be one of the biggest motivators for you to sit down and get a lot written. The other thing that's going to be really important, especially for me writing fiction, is I always like to know where I'm going. So there's kind of two camps when it comes to approaching a novel. And this goes for nonfiction as well. There's kind of two camps, and one of them is the pantsers and one of them is the plotters. They're called pantsers because they fly by the seat of their pants, right? Okay. Whenever they're writing. So they just they sit down, and this is like a Stephen King method. He's a little bit more of a pantser, where he just sits down and just starts writing and writing and writing and writing, and the story just kind of pours out of him. And then you have the plotters, which I lean a little bit more towards the plotting spectrum. I want to call it a spectrum because it's not just either or. It's a little bit of both. But I lean a little bit more towards the plotting because I like to have things planned out and structured. One of the most important things for me to have planned out and structured is where I'm going. So it's literally the end of whatever book I'm working on. And knowing that end point is really what helps me then work backwards and establish everything that happens before it. And I would say that's one of the most important tools to writing quickly, is to just know where you're going ahead of time. Because if you don't know where you're going, you're going to invariably just end up kind of sitting there staring at a blank page on your monitor and not knowing what to write next. Or, that's when you get yourself in trouble by writing yourself into a corner, as people call it, or getting this writer's block, as people call it. And really all that is just they don't know what they're doing with the story. And so they haven't worked it out yet, and they have to go through that process.
So how do you recommend doing that? Outlining, or I know you talked about before writing the last chapter of a book. Do you use both those methods, or do you prefer one?
Yeah, well, I kind of when I started off, I was a lot more structured, and I would sit down and I actually cleared off counter space in my kitchen, and I used masking tape to make this big kind of storyboard, and I'd use index card for each of the scenes, and I was actually went way overboard with the actual structuring and plotting of it. Now I've kind of toned it back. So really what I do now is I just kind of write bullet points. I write like a sentence for each chapter, if you will. Like, what's going to happen in this chapter? And if I get stuck, and I'll go through the whole book doing that. And if I get stuck at one chapter, I'm like, I don't really know what happens next. Well, then I'll skip it. And I'll say, okay, well, what's the next big thing that I want to happen in the story in general, right? And I'll just go to that, and I'll start working from there. And then I just go back and fill in the blanks. So if someone's going to sit down and go to write a book, what I recommend is, number one, start with whatever scene or whatever story element got you excited about the book in the first place, right? So if I want to write this really cool story about this one guy escaping 100 zombies that are chasing him down, well, I would write that scene first, that one scene where he's literally running away from the zombies, and not worry about anything else happening. I'd get that scene just kind of out of myself so that I have it established. And then after that, then it's time to figure out, okay, well, is that taking place in the middle, or is it at the beginning? Is it at the end? And kind of just go from there and say, okay, well, what's the end of the story that I want? Start working backwards from there. I might jump to the beginning, start working forwards. It's really just there's no one formula to any particular book. Each one's going to come out a little bit differently, but that's kind of the guideline that I approach it with is from that top level, just really short sentences on what do I see happening in each of these chapters? What do I want to cover?
I really like what you said there about like if you're really excited about a certain scene, just write that. Like I feel like a lot of people, especially, you know, in the business world, they're like, okay, there's a set order of ways to do things and you got to start from A and get to Z. And I know in my personal life, if, you know, one day I'm working and it's like, you know, I have a lot of good ideas and I want to do this one thing, I should just go do that. And then I come back to the prescribed work that I'm supposed to do. And that's one of the things actually that's really helped me is just like wherever my energy like needs to be released on, just go ahead and release it. And then go back to the ABCs kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly, Travis. That enthusiasm and that passion, it's going to net you these gains that are just hard to see anywhere else. So if you're struggling with something because you really don't want to be doing it, then you're just going to you just sit there and you stare at your screen and you're kind of thinking about other stuff in your head, or you know maybe you're thinking about all the other things you need to do or the things you'd rather be doing. When if you would just stop and go do those other things and get them out, then you're really going to see a lot of gains that way. And I don't always approach like when I actually start to draft the novel. This is more of in the planning stage. I'd let myself kind of do that. There are times where you have to slog through and kind of, you know, pay your dues, if you will, and get through stuff that you don't want to get through. But at the beginning, especially whenever you're first sitting down and you're passionate about something, just turn off your inner editor, turn off all the voices inside your head and just start writing and get that stuff out. And don't worry what it looks like. Don't worry if it's good. Don't worry about any of that other stuff because it doesn't matter. Just get it out on the page and make it your own.
So I guess that's the advice for the next step, I assume. Like after you get an outline, a basic outline, just basically start writing, correct?
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of little tools I use in that, but basically that's exactly what I do is I get the outline and then I use a program called Scrivener. I highly advise anybody who's going to be writing absolutely anything from academic work to blogging to nonfiction to fiction, any type of writing, that if you're doing it, get Scrivener. Highly recommend it.
And why? Like, I still use Word, but I've heard a lot about Scrivener. I don't really understand. I know it's way better because I keep hearing it is, but I don't understand why.
Yeah, sure. Well, one of the cool things about Scrivener is it's really, really powerful, but it's kind of only as powerful as you want it to be. Mm-hmm. And so you can use it just like Word. You can use it as a very basic word processing software. And I actually put together a little, literally a minute tutorial video on how to do that for some friends. But what's really nice about it, the way I use it, is it's project management software. That's how I use it. So I use it to structure all of my writing. It's got, you know, this internal file structure with documents and with folders that you can organize everything. You can literally drop any kind of file into it. You could drop a movie into it. You could drop audio into it. You could put research websites in there, everything. So it's all in one file and you can take it around with you. And Scrivener knows how to handle it. And so if it's a file that it can open natively, then it'll open it. Like if it's a picture, it can just open it inside Scrivener. But let's say it's an MP3 or let's say it's a movie. What it'll do is it'll just open it on your computer while it's still saved in Scrivener. So it's in one spot, but it'll just use your computer to open the file and you can view it that way. So that's one of the big things that I really recommend, big reasons that I really recommend Scrivener is the fact that it's project management software and it helps you keep organized so you can keep all of your stuff in one well-organized place.
Okay. You're selling me a little bit. So it's basically just on one screen. So instead of having to, like if I were to want to do that natively, I'd have to have like Windows Explorer or, you know, the Mac Finder window open. But it's basically that mixed with a Word document. And it sounds like there's a little bit easier structure involved too.
Yeah, and that's only the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of other powerful things that it can do, from, you know, creation of books to to different what's called compiling, where it takes what you've got inside of it and it produces a new file for others to consume. So there's a lot of little things like that. I would say just the biggest takeaway for me is really that project management aspect of it that I really enjoy. But it does so many other things also. It can do indexing. It can do automatically generate a table of contents. It can create ebooks. It can do everything. So there's two pieces of software that I need in my career as a writer. One of them is Scrivener, and one of them is just like an internet browser, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And I could do my entire career that way.
I know you've talked about Write or Die before too. Is that something you use all the time? And can you talk a little bit about what that program is?
Yeah, well, so let me transition to actually talking about just the writing process of how you actually. So I've got my outline, right, and that was the first step in our creating a book. And so now the next step is to actually write the book. And so I use Scrivener to house everything, and I do a lot of writing within Scrivener itself. But as you mentioned, Write or Die. Write or Die is a wonderful, wonderful program. And so you mentioned that I did the 50,000 words in one day. I've actually, since that first time, I've done it 3 more times. So I've done it 4 times total. 4 days I've written over 200,000 words in 4 days. And that would not have been possible without Write or Die. So basically what it does is, at the end of the day, it's a psychological trick, and that's all it does. And so you'll hear people be like, oh, it's got this kamikaze mode where it starts deleting your work, and I don't want it to delete my work and all this stuff. And that's true. It does have those settings. I don't even turn those settings on. I keep it like on the bare minimum, just the lowest warning settings. Because what it does is if you stop writing, and I've got this black background that I write on with inside of it, it starts to turn red. And then it gets brighter, and then it gets brighter. And all you have to do to make that red go away is you got to keep writing. And it's just this psychological mental trick that keeps your fingers moving. And you see the screen start turning red, and you're like, oh, crap, I got to keep writing. And so you keep writing. And that little thing right there is what has catapulted me. If I write without it, I might clear like 500 to maybe 700 words an hour, which a lot of people will say that's fast even. With Write or Die, I've cleared 5,000 words in a single hour, and that was extreme. But I think that's my upper limit, was somewhere around 5,000 words in one single hour.
Wow. Okay, so now we kind of get like a little insight into how you actually do the writing. And is there anything actually you'd want to add about the actual writing itself process?
Yeah, and so what I would recommend is, and this is important whether or not you're using Write or Die. I recommend using Write or Die, but even if you don't use it, use something like a Pomodoro technique. So that's where it's going to be, you set a timer for 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 25 minutes or whatever it is. And you can do this whenever you're doing anything. It doesn't just have to be writing, but you set the timer, you kind of set your goals beforehand, you set the timer, and then you work until that timer goes off, right? There's various free software out there that'll act as a timer for you. But what I recommend before you do that is to sit down. Don't do this on a computer. Get a piece of paper out, get a notepad out, and just think about what you're about to write. So if I'm writing a scene, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start jotting down anything that comes to mind about that scene, whether it's dialogue or whether it's the setting or just the characters or just my main character, what he's thinking or his mental state or maybe his goals, what the goals are for the scene, anything. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to jot down notes by hand for about 5 minutes. And then I'll kind of let those sink in a little bit. And then I set that timer and I just start writing as fast as I possibly can. And I try and turn off that internal editor, turn off all the voices. I don't even pay attention to everything I just wrote on the notepad anymore. I just kind of let it flow out of me, flow through the fingers. And that by itself will greatly increase your word count, no matter if you're using Write or Die or just writing even in Word.
So during your like quote unquote break time, you just sit there and take some notes? Is that, or you don't count that as actual work time, correct?
Well, I would count that as work time. I mean, okay. Break time, I think you should kind of walk away. Yeah. But what I would recommend if you were to do, if you were to do the Pomodoro technique, mm-hmm. I would say do something like 5 minutes of note taking, mm-hmm. 15 to 20 minutes of actual writing. And then, the remaining 5 to 10 minutes of the half hour, the remaining 5 to 10 minutes to mental break, go walk away, go do some push-ups, go empty the dishwasher, whatever the case is, and then come back to it. And so that's what I would recommend. But definitely I would count that note-taking time as actual work time because you're doing mental work. It's definitely not a break.
Oh, I totally agree. I actually recently started doing my own version of that, which is 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off. And I've found that to be perfect. I'm curious about the 25 minutes on, the Pomodoro technique. And what I'm doing is basically an offshoot of that. but I've found it to be great. And the reasoning behind it is basically we're not supposed to be mental marathon runners. We're supposed to be kind of sprinters from like a biological standpoint. And we're supposed to really be able to focus and then completely let go of things. So during your break time, do you just do whatever, you just walk away? Or do you kind of have like a set schedule where it's like, all right, this 5 minutes I'm going to do some push-ups and jumping jacks, and then this 10-minute break I'm going to go, I'm going to go clean the dishwasher or whatever. Do you have a schedule?
Yeah. Nothing that is consistent day to day, but I'll basically just kind of map out the day. Like, what do I need to get done today? And kind of between each break, like this break, I'm going to go hit the treadmill for 5 minutes, and then as I'm doing that, I'll be like, okay, well, next break I need to go, throw some clothes in the laundry or whatever the case is. And so there's not a set thing. It's just kind of like whatever it is, I just need to walk away from the computer for a little bit. That's the important part. Is what I'm doing matters way less than just clearing my head and making sure that I'm not thinking about the work, and then keeping a timer going, keeping that 5 minutes, because you don't want that 5 to stretch into 10 or 15 or anything like that. But make sure your breaks are around 5 minutes. I usually do that for like 3 times, like 3 cycles, right?
Yeah.
And so that's like 90 minutes or so total time. And then after that, you might want to take a little bit longer of a break. Take like a 10 to 15 minute break before starting again, or even a half-hour break before starting the cycle over. But yeah, the key thing is to just, like you said, be a sprinter. Don't be a marathon runner. Clear your head. Let yourself let it go. And then whenever you come back to it, hit it as hard as you can. And when you approach it that way, it's incredible how fast you can actually get things done. And like you said, this is applicable not just to writing, but this is applicable to just life of getting anything done.
Yeah, another thing, I want to get back to the writing, but another thing I liked is you said the timer, and that's something I implemented. And when you're sitting there working and you have a timer saying, for me, it's 50 minutes, like, okay, I got to sit here and I got to work for 50 minutes. There's no thought in my head of like, well, maybe I have to take a bathroom break, or, maybe I should just walk around. It's like, all right, I'm working for 15 minutes. And then on the flip side, during my break of 10 minutes, it's like I can completely relax because I know I've got 10 minutes to do whatever I want. So it's really nice to just completely unplug.
Exactly.
And, know that it's gonna let me know that, hey, it's time to go back to work. But let's get back into the writing, because that's obviously why you're on. So after the writing, we go into, I guess, editing's the next step.
Yeah, well, and so usually self-editing, and I would recommend there's a great, I think there's 2 books out there. I know I use one of them, but it's called Self-Editing for Fiction Writers. Wonderful, wonderful resource. I think they have self-editing for non-fiction writers as well. I believe that exists, and so I would recommend checking that out based just on my knowledge of the first one. But so basically, I do a first pass where I write the book as fast as I possibly can. I don't correct anything. I actually turn off my spell check, turn off the spell check, turn off the grammar check, turn off all of that stuff that distracts me, because none of that really matters.
Yeah.
And just write the book as fast as possible. Once I get to the end, then that's when it's time for me to go back and kind of start over. And what I'll do is I just start back at the beginning, and I leave a lot of notes to myself. I leave a lot of comments, a lot of notes to just say, as I'm going through of whatever the case is. I write on kind of what's something that's called like a go forward basis. For example, let's say that I had to this is really basic, but let's say I had to change a character's eye color, right? It started off brown, but it needs to be blue. I'll just make a note, that's a little example, but it could be a character's name. It could be the gender, whatever that case is. And whenever I realize that I need to, let's say I'm halfway through the book when I have to make that change, I don't go back and correct it all the way through the book up to that point. It's just a waste of time, and it's going to slow you down. It's going to kill your momentum. And so I just make a note. Go back and change this character's eye color from brown to blue. And, as I go through, I'll have to work through and clear all that kind of stuff, along with kind of just clearing all my notes and rereading each of the scenes. I write everything in scenes, and just going through scene by scene and making sure that they're what I want them to be. And I just rework through the whole book that way. Again, I still don't pay much attention at that point. I don't pay much attention at all to a little bit more attention to grammar, a little bit more attention to spelling, but I'm still not at the very end. I'm going to do one more pass after I do the second revision pass. I'm going to do one more pass, and that pass is going to be a proofing check. Really, it's going to be make sure everything's spelled right, make sure the language I'm using is correct. And so There's another podcast. It's called the Self-Publishing Podcast, and these guys put out a book. It's called Write, Publish, Repeat. I really recommend also people check that book out if they want to get into writing, because there's a lot of good principles they teach in that book. And one of the things and it's the same way I write. One of the things they say about their writing style is, they write their first draft where they get everything out. They say what they want to say. And the second time that they do a pass is they kind of make sure that they're communicating the right message on that second pass. They make sure they're saying it not the right way they want to say it, just making sure the message is clear. And then the third pass, which is the same thing I do, that's whenever the artist really comes out. That's whenever you correct the language. That's whenever you make it more powerful. And you make sure that you already know you're saying the right thing, that you're communicating the right message, I should say. But now is when you want to make it poetry, right? It's when you want to make it interesting and said in an interesting way, if that makes sense. Hopefully that does.
Yeah. So first question for you, when you're writing and let's say you halfway through a book, you realize, oh no, this person's eye color was brown, but it needs to be blue. How do you take a note of that? Like, how do you remind yourself?
So you can do this in Microsoft Word also, but in Scrivener, I just have a comment feature. And so I will either leave a comment, or I usually have in Scrivener, and this is another power of Scrivener where it's a little bit more difficult in Word. I just create a new document called like review notes inside Scrivener. And I just put all of review notes like that in there saying, need to change this character's, eye color. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the day, or at the end of the book or whatever, I can go back and look at my review notes that I have and prioritize them and look at which ones need to get accomplished first and things like that. But and going forward, I mean that the hard part is making sure that you get all those changes in there where they need to be. You're going to have to get that in either way. But one of the powerful things about Scrivener is you can just create those little documents like review notes and notes to yourself and things like that, where you can just dump stuff that you need to get off your mind.
And then, so you said around the third pass is like when the real like artist comes out and you try to make it into poetry. How do you go about doing that? Do you just read stuff and say that doesn't sound as nice or as beautiful as it can, and just rewrite paragraphs, or what's the process?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And that's one of the things that's a little bit harder to teach, because that's going to come back to your own style and come back to what you like as a writer, and so that's going to be a little bit different for everybody. I mean, they can all follow that process, but the actual end result will be a little bit different for everybody. And so yeah, so I just go through and I make sure that I'm setting things up the way I want to set them up, that each of the characters kind of has their own voice. This is where I do a lot of dialogue work, and in that, the characters will be saying the right things already, but I put it into their voice, and I give it that unique voice so that no two people say the same thing the same way. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that you can tell them apart. Like, you should be able to tell if two characters are having a conversation, you should be able to tell which one is which just based on what they're saying. You wouldn't even need attribution. You wouldn't need, he said versus she said. You should be able to tell them apart just by how they say things.
This is actually one of the things I think that scares me the most about writing is I don't think I'm, like, let's say we were writing a fiction story. I think I can, give across like the details of it, but making it actually into poetry or making it beautiful is kind of a tough thing for me. Do you have any advice for people that are looking to take their writing from kind of just the facts into something that people will actually want to read?
Yeah, well, it's important that you keep your target audience in mind. And this is one thing that really differentiates people who are just kind of casual writers versus people who are actually trying to sell their work, right? Is making sure that you've got an audience, or that you've got a target audience in mind, and that you're writing it to them to make sure that it's something that they're going to like. So if you're writing nonfiction, it's really going to be like, what is the message I'm trying to communicate to my audience? And does this communicate that message in an interesting way? And that's really all it comes back to. And that's all the poetry you really need. It doesn't need to be overly complicated. It just needs to be, something that's kind of interesting. And really, this is also where, as you're getting started, it's harder to get a feel for that. And this is where using beta readers and trusted friends that are going to look it over and give you honest feedback, that's where they become really important in your career. Because they're going to be the ones that tell you, like, no, you really missed the mark on this one aspect. And it's important to know.
Can you? Because you write under a pen name, so you can't really give it to friends, I assume.
Well, so I don't give it to any of my friends. I do have beta readers that are also, like, they're already my readers. I've solicited people so I do give it to them. And I was going to say that's one of the key things that I'm talking about with my process, because at this point in the process, I still haven't turned it over to anybody. So after that third pass, that's when I would give it to an actual editor based on, to get editing done for whatever kind of editing I'm looking for. And there's different tiers or different types of editing work that you can get from an editor. And that's when I would turn it over to them and start to get that second pair of eyes. I try and make everything after those three passes. I try and make everything as like this book is done, right? Mm-hmm. I don't give, a book that's like only 50% and expect other people to clean it up. I clean it up as much as I possibly can myself. And then I give it to other people to make it even better.
And those beta readers, I kind of want to go back to that really quick. Do you ask them any specific questions, or you just kind of say, here's my book, what do you think?
Travis, that's a wonderful question. I not only ask them questions, because if you just ask them what they think, what they're gonna do is they're gonna email you back and they're gonna say, it was great, I loved it. Mm-hmm. Especially if they're already fans of yours, right? Which is the trouble that I run into, is I'm already selecting from a pool of people that are kind of biased in favor of me. And so what I do is I not only ask them questions, I give them a Google form, right? I create like one of these free just Google forms and give them a link to it and say, go fill this out. And in that's where I'll have specific questions, and I'll ask them a variety of things from, rate this or rate that, to tell me what you thought about this or tell me what you thought about that. And that becomes easier over time as you become a little bit more aware of yourself as a writer, because you'll know when you're writing a book or when it's done, you'll have a good feeling for, I feel really confident that, part A of this is really good, but maybe part B isn't. And so that's where in your questionnaire, you'd be like, what did you think about part B? And, keeping that as generic as I can, as to make it kind of evergreen advice. But, that's one of those like muscles that you'll kind of work out and build as you write more and more and more. And so it's a little bit harder whenever you're first beginning, because you may think, oh, I think my dialogue is wonderful, or I think my conclusions are well founded and they're well supported, where actually they're not. Like, your dialogue's awful and your conclusions don't make any sense. And so you got to trust these people to point that out to you. But as you do it a little bit more, you'll become a little bit more in tune with that, and you'll be able to ask them and guide them and get the feedback that you really need.
So would your question be, what do you think about the dialogue in my book? Or would it be something more like, do you like this character? Or what do you think about this specific, meeting? Or how do you phrase that?
And that really, really depends on what the issue is and how kind of aware of it I am. Because there will be times where I'm just kind of feeling, in general, a little bit flimsy on something, right? And so I'll ask them a really open-ended question, like, what did you think about the pacing of this book? Was it too fast, or was it too slow, or was it just right? Ask them something really, really loose like that, versus if there's one particular part of a character or of a scene that I'm a little bit hesitant on, then I'll get really specific. And so it's one of those things where it changes based on my needs and based on what I think. I almost always kind of leave a catch-all question of just, of maybe even a couple catch-all questions of, in general, what did you think? Did you like this? How would you rate this on Amazon? That's one question I always ask. How would you rate this on Amazon? And, a follow-up on that is, if it's anything less than 4 stars, what would make this 4 stars, or what would make this 5 stars? And I always ask those questions, just blanket every single time, because I think that advice is important. But it's tough based on like individual books, because each book that you write is going to be a little bit different, and you're going to feel a little bit confident and less confident on different areas of that book.
Have you ever changed something that you really liked, or you were really confident on, but all your readers were like, I didn't really like this character, I really didn't like this scene? And have you ever had to go back and like rethink something that you thought was good at when you wrote it? Or is it usually you pretty much know?
No, that's a wonderful, wonderful questions. One of the I worked on a book last over the summer back in July, and I sent it to beta readers, like 5 or 6 beta readers, and yeah, a lot of them, not all of them, but most of them came back with this one particular scene where like, I don't really like this scene, and it was just one of those things I had never even. It wasn't even on my radar, and they all came back with that, and they kind of all gave me feedback. And so I was faced with that dilemma of like, well, do I cut the scene entirely? Do I rework it? How do I approach this? And really what I did was I just kind of opened a dialogue with each of them and you know, dug a little bit deeper on the issue that they were having. And then I was able to, fortunately, I actually liked the scene, and there were just certain aspects of it that they didn't like. And so what I did was I changed just some minor things that kind of reframed that individual scene to make it better. Yeah. And that made the story even all around a lot better too. But it was just one of those things where it wasn't on my radar. And here at the end of the day, just keep in mind that it's your book, right? And that's one of the beauties of writing something yourself is you get to call the shots. Now you got to trust that if you get a lot of people that come back with advice or not advice on something, but just feedback saying, I didn't really like this. This didn't work for me. You need to keep that in mind. But at the same time, at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to have to, you know, live with the decision, and you're the one that's going to have to make a decision and go with it. So I say always trust your gut, and whatever your gut's telling you is probably right. So take the feedback, listen to it, process it, run it through your own filters, and then say, okay, what am I really feeling about this? And then go with that.
Gotcha. So then after you compile all like the reader's data and you make any changes, the next step, is it just getting the cover and like finishing everything off, or is there what are the next steps from there?
Yeah, so once it's gone through an editor or a proofreader or whatever that is, let's say that, you know, the final book is done. The final writing is done. Usually I will order the cover really early on in the process. I don't wait until the book is done to get a cover. And this is for a couple key reasons. And really what it comes back to is marketing. And so having that cover, it's a huge marketing tool. And so early on, I always advise people to write the blurb, or at least a draft blurb, like product description, and get the cover, because then what you're able to do is you're able to send those off to blogs. You're able to get, you know, a pre-order up on Amazon or on Apple if that's something you want to do. And you're able to just kind of start spreading it around and getting the word out, putting it on Facebook, putting it on Twitter, putting it on Instagram, you know, all these different things. And so I like to have the cover actually really, really early on. And also getting a cover early on helps motivate me, because you see that cover and you're like, man, that looks awesome. I really like that. I need to write this book. I need to get it out. And it gives this kind of finality to it, or this goal. So I like to get the cover early. But once the book is done, once all the writing is done, then it comes back to formatting. And once it's formatted, I mean, you're good to go. And I do all my own formatting actually, and I do all of it in Scrivener. Now I'm transitioning to where I use InDesign, Adobe's InDesign for CreateSpace, that's print formatting, print on demand formatting. Mm-hmm. So that I can have a paperback or even a hardback. I can get a hardback also. I'm starting to transition to use InDesign because it's a much, much more powerful tool for print formatting. But as it is, Scrivener for Mac anyways, now there is also Scrivener for Windows, which has slightly different feature set. But for Mac anyways, it creates digital ebooks with the click of a button. And so I've already got all my kind of custom templates set up. I literally just push a button and I've got an ebook, and it's done. It's that quick. So once the writing is done, 5 minutes later, I've got a formatted book formatted for ebook anyways.
Wow. Okay. So usually the print and the ebook, like formatting's a little bit different, but this program like makes it the same process. Is that correct? Or
kind of. The print formatting is always a little bit more tedious.
I see.
Because the print formatting, you actually have to worry about pages and page counts, and you got to worry about orphans and widows and
What's that mean?
And a lot of other
widows.
Yeah, so like the orphans and widows, that's basically like when a sentence appears on a page by itself, or you get like just the very last sentence of a paragraph, or even the last word that kind of lingers onto a new page, and it just kind of looks unprofessional. And so that's one of the big things that whenever you pick up a book like a Barnes and Noble, and if you flip through it, you're not going to find any of that stuff. Like a page is going to be full, or if there's a chapter break, you're not going to have like just one random page with like 3 words on it. That's a waste of paper, really, is what it comes back to. And it just looks unprofessional. And so same thing whenever I create my own. You have to go through, and you have to literally go through page by page. And when you see things like that, you have to correct them. And there's a variety of ways to correct it. You mess with the font size, you mess with the paragraph spacing, you mess with all these little things. And sometimes you even change the words. You rewrite a sentence or something to shrink it or to make it longer or whatever the case is. And so all of that makes doing print books a little bit more tedious. Once you do it a couple times, it's really not that bad. It's not a hard thing to do at all, but it does take a little bit longer. And so the beauty of ebooks is you don't have to worry about any of that. Ebook is essentially, it's a really dumbed down web page. It's done in HTML. There's no styling to it. Like the ebooks, like the readers, like a Kindle or a Nook, they handle how it actually looks. And so really the only thing you're giving them is like a text document that's just not formatted at all. And it would be the same as like just reading bland HTML from any like website from the 90s, right? And that's what an ebook is. And that's why it's so easy to just put it together.
Out of curiosity, how come you don't just hire somebody to take care of the print book formatting? It sounds kind of tedious.
A couple of reasons. It's not as tedious as you'd think. Like I said, once you kind of get into it, it actually goes pretty quickly. Little things like that, because you can get formatting pretty cheaply, and I definitely advise anybody who is not comfortable doing any of this stuff themselves, hire someone else to do it. Bar none. Don't even think about it. Just hire someone else to do it. What I like to do is I like to have control because I already know how to do it and it doesn't take me that long to do it. I like to keep control because I frequently make changes. And I don't want to have to go back and email someone and hey, I want to change this on this, or I want to update that in here and all that. I like having that control where I can just kind of do it myself. And that's one of the reasons that, I make sure I do all the ebook formatting, especially myself, because I make a ton of changes to my ebooks. Almost anytime I publish something new, I update all of my ebooks. And I've got it set up in Scrivener where I can do that really quickly. And so that just kind of makes it more simple, gives me a little bit more control. And that's why I like to do it myself. And frankly, I can't, cause I'll be talking to my friends and they're like, why don't you just have someone else do that for you? It's not worth your time. And it's like, well, I can't, like, what is worth my time? Mm-hmm. I want to work a certain number of hours a day. I literally can't write all of those hours a day. I've got to give my brain a rest to do something else. And I can sit there and I can format something while I've got like music playing or while I've got Netflix on or whatever. And it's kind of like just a mental reset because it doesn't really require all that much brain capacity to do it. And so that's another one of the reasons I kind of like doing some of those little things myself, because it's just easy and I get this sense of accomplishment out of it. And that gives me confidence to go forward and do something else that's a little bit harder.
Now, I want to jump into the marketing, but before we jump into the marketing, is there anything else that we missed talking about in the actual creation of the book itself?
Use an editor. We really didn't touch on that. Use an editor, especially if you're just beginning. There's different types of editing. At the very, very least, I would definitely recommend using proofreaders at the very end. I would recommend using multiple proofreaders. So you'd hire, and you can go to Odesk for all this. Odesk is a place I would just recommend if you're just trying to find some editors and you're new to the process. Go to Odesk. There's other places you can find them, but you're going to find some good ones there. So use a proofreader. Use 2 of them. So send it to one. Let them do all their work. Come back with a cleaned up file and then send it to another one. Don't send it to them at the same time so that they're not correcting the same things. Do that. And then I also highly recommend anybody before they even get to that point, especially if it's one of their first books, hire a line editor. That's going to be a little bit more expensive than a proofreader, but hire a line editor. And they're the one that's going to go through it and make sure that your language and the words you're actually using are better so that you're not repeating yourself and you're not saying things the same way, and little things like that. That's the kind of stuff they're going to improve.
What's it cost for a line editor versus a proofreader?
So proofreaders, those are, as far as editing goes, there's I like to think of it as 3 different tiers of editing. And so you have the low level, which is the proofreader, kind of the mid level, which is the line editor, and the high level, which is the developmental editor. And so each of them are kind of potentially exponentially more expensive than the one before it. So proofreading, you can spend anywhere from like $100 to $300, right, on a novel. And hopefully if you're spending $300, that they're a lot better. But I would say that's a general range, somewhere between 100 and 300. Line editors are going to be more. So they're going to be maybe like in the 200, 250 up to, potentially up to $500 for a line edit. Developmental editors can be, I've worked with one developmental editor. It's easy to hit the 4 figures on a single novel with a developmental editor. And what a developmental editor does is they're the people that come in, and I actually, when I do work with a developmental editor, I like to work with them before I write the book, because they're the people that come in and they're going to look at your story or whatever it is from a really high level. They're going to look at the characters. They're going to look at the plot. They're going to look at, high level things like that, and to make sure that you're telling a good story. Not that necessarily that you're telling it in a good way. That's more of the line editor, but just that, overall the story is really good. And that, the story structure type edits, those are the ones that are the most expensive, because they're the ones that are the most difficult. And so I don't recommend everyone work with a developmental editor. I'd say work with one eventually, but it's not urgent in the beginning. But definitely the line editor, because the line editor is going to make the most impact on making your writing better. And then the proofreader is one of the bare minimums, because you don't want to be sending something out with typos and things like that. And then also for kind of self-proofing, what I do is I actually run mine through multiple spell check programs. So I'll run it like through Scrivener spell checker. I'll run it through Microsoft Word's spell checker. I could drop it into Pages and run it through that spell checker, because they're all a little bit different, so they catch different things. And so I run it multiple times through multiple spell checkers. And then also as a part of my proofing process, this is really big, I actually have my computer read it back to me, the entire book, while I read it myself. So I'll actually put it on my Kindle or my iPad, let my computer start reading it to me, and I'll follow along. And that'll actually help catch a lot of the proofing type stuff, awkward language, awkward sentences, typos, because the computer will stumble on the typos because it's just a robot, right? It's just doing whatever it's told.
Oh, I see.
And yeah, so that's an excellent way to proof it also.
So you read it, and at the same time you're listening to it? Is that how it works?
Yeah, it's exactly right. If you want to spend even more time, another really, really powerful thing to do is to actually read it out loud yourself.
That's the classic.
Because
that's what everyone says. Like, I remember in grade school, my teachers would be like, you need to read it out loud. But I was always like, yeah. And the first time I did it, I'm like, oh, wow, this sounds really bad. Like, I need to change this.
Well, yeah, and it's weird because you're used to speaking, right? And so when you read something out loud, it changes it from whenever you're just reading it kind of in your head, and putting voice to the sentences, that will really, really show you when you've done something wrong, where like a sentence or a paragraph or whatever just doesn't feel right because it's clunky or it's awkward or whatever the case is. You'll pick that up immediately when you read it out loud. That's an easy way to save yourself a lot of money on an editor who's going to go back and correct all that stuff, is to spend that time doing that up front. There's a lot of people who don't want to spend that time. They don't want to read their book 4 times or have it read to them multiple times and then read it out loud again, also like that. And so, but that's one of those things where if you want to put out a quality product, sometimes you have to do that kind of work.
Now let's jump into the marketing, which I know it's not your favorite part, but it's 100% my favorite part of anything, because I've seen over and over again, people have like a not that great of a product, but if they're really good at the marketing, they can sell it. And I've seen people too that have a great product, whether it be a book or some kind of other product. You know, they have this great product, but they don't know how to market, so they can't sell it. So what have you done to market your books? And it's got to be a little bit tougher too, because you, once again, write them all under a pen name. So you can't exactly just go on podcasts and plug them.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of those things, working under a pen name, where I think I've hindered myself. I've had success, and I think I would have had more success if I wasn't doing things the way I'm doing them now. But In any case, so yeah, marketing is it's one of my least favorite things to do, but it is very, very important. And so there's multiple different things you can do. First and foremost, this is big in any line of any business, or whenever you're dealing with your customers or your readers or whatever you call them, right? Is get a newsletter and get people on that newsletter. That is, owning your own website, so having your own hosted domain name. Blogger, Blogspot by Google. It works. I still recommend people not use that. Just go out, spend the money. It's like $10 to get a domain, and then like $5 to $10 a month to get hosting. Spend that money, because what happens then with that and then your newsletter is you own that content. You can communicate any message you want to communicate. Newsletters is honestly, it's one of the ongoing is one of the biggest marketing tools that I have. Outside of that, I will use Facebook, which Facebook and Twitter, things like that. Your readers aren't discovering you on those platforms.
Yeah.
But what's nice about them is you're able to connect with your readers that are on that platform. So it's a really great connection tool to just talk to your readers, both Twitter and Facebook. You're not going to use that to find new readers. That's a key distinction. But one of the big problems with Facebook, they keep kind of tightening their controls over what people get, what is actually shown to your fans. Like if you create a fan page for your author profile and people like that fan page, I think it's down to like 6% or something like that. 6%, 7% of those people, whenever you make a post on that fan page, only 6 to 7% of those people are actually going to see that post if they don't actually manually go check your page to look for one. And so that's a severe hindrance, and that's one of the reasons I say don't rely on that. Rely on your own newsletter and your own website, because you're not going to be able to reach your full market using any of those other tools. So I use social media. I use it to connect with readers whenever they talk to me, and I respond. I talk back with them and converse. One of the biggest marketing tools, honestly, is my newsletter. Outside of that, you move into paid promotion type stuff, and there's some pretty cheap paid promotions out there, and you can find some things on Fiverr. Like I think it's BK Nights is a Fiverr gig where it's a really good promotion. Really, the big player, the one that can actually make careers, is BookBub. I know you had a friend of mine, Simon Whistler, on your show back at the beginning of March, and he talked about BookBub, and it's amazing. I've seen BookBub. It'll launch an author into the top 100 on Amazon, and when you're in the top 100 on Amazon, you're literally selling thousands of books a day of that one book, right? And whenever you get that kind of exposure, provided that you've got all your other kind of funnels lined up where you've made it easy for them to connect with you on Facebook, you've made it easy for them to go to your website, and you've made it easy for them to get on your newsletter. That's what's going to let you kind of build that base readership and then get your stuff out to them over again. But BookBub is really, really the big player. There's a couple other ones. There's eBook Soda. There's BookSends. A couple other those. They're essentially just mailing lists for hire, and so they've just got a huge mailing list of people, and then you pay them whatever the fee is for whatever they're charging, and then you get access to that mailing list by way of like they'll put your book in one of their distributions type thing.
That was actually going to be my next question. It's great. I love the newsletter, and I think one thing a lot of people in general don't do is they don't look at their repeat customers. They don't think about how can I utilize my already existing customers. But it still begs the question to me, if you're a completely new author and you're looking to get your first 100 or 1,000 readers, is that the way to go? Is like a BookBub, or is there other things you'd recommend?
BookBub is the way to go for authors that are both new and established. So okay. I'll put that out there. If you can get a BookBub, it literally will pay for itself in a couple hours. Pay whatever they're, if you need to take out a loan to pay for it in the first place, which it's not that expensive. But if that's what you need to do, then by all means do it if they accept you. That's the hard part, is getting accepted to something like BookBub. But yeah, you're right. For new authors, it can be very hard to get exposure. And so a few of the tools that I've seen successfully work, one of the things that seems to repeatedly successfully work is quick release periods. So you're putting out a lot of content under a short window of time. So I've actually seen authors release 3 full novels up to 4 full novels all at once. Like that was their launch strategy. I'm going to write 4 full novels. I'm not going to publish any of them until I'm ready to release, and then I'm going to release all of them at the same time. And that can actually work really well. Because it just gets you a lot of exposure in Amazon, and people see that you've got a backlist of stuff and they start buying it, and that ups the visibility. Other than that, one of the nice things is you can go Amazon Select, which is, so it's Amazon exclusive. So you're not selling on Barnes & Noble, you're not selling on Apple. And if you've only got one book, I actually recommend going this route, going Amazon Select, because what they do is they give you the ability to do some really cool pricing stuff. Like you can price that book for free for up to 5 days within a 90-day period, and get a lot of exposure that way. And what you do is you essentially just try and line up a bunch of reviews as fast as you can. So you get your friends and family if they're willing to do it, or you just you find reviewers on Goodreads. Goodreads is a great website for to find, especially fiction readers. I'm not sure about nonfiction, but especially fiction readers, go onto Goodreads and find people there. Give them free copies of your book. Honestly, I say give a free copy to anybody who's willing to read your book, especially early on. Just give it to them, and then ask them for a review. And once you've built up a certain number of reviews, then you run one of these free promotions. And you get a paid ad on top of the free promotion. So you're giving away a book for free, and you're paying one of these newsletters to promote it for you. Mm-hmm. And really, that just ups your exposure. And you're not going to make any money immediately on that, because obviously you're giving away a free book. But really, you got to look at it from a long-term standpoint. Is you're finding a lot of readers that way. And then when you put out your next book, those are the people that are going to come back and they're going to buy it. And that's what I would recommend doing if you've only got one book out there. Is again, just focus on getting reviews. Focus on giving away that book as many times as you possibly can to find readers. I don't recommend going. There's something called perma-free, where you give it away for free, essentially on like Apple, Barnes & Noble, Google Play, and then Amazon will price match it to free. Mm-hmm. I don't recommend going that route until you've got multiple books out. I see. That said, once you've got multiple books out, and I recommend writing in a series, especially to start with, focus on a series. And once you get that second book out, that third book out, and you give away that first book for free, all of a sudden you get a ton of readers, because that, especially early on when it first goes to free, you get a huge spike in downloads. And especially if you line it up with any kind of paid promotion around it as well, you get a huge spike in downloads. People like that. Hopefully you've written a really good book. Then what happens is they like that, and then they turn around and they buy the rest of your books just outright. They buy the rest of them, all of them. And that's another great way to really kickstart your sales.
And what do you price your books at? Like after the free period and all that kind of stuff, is it the 99 cents or the $9.99?
Yeah, this is one of those things that, as a self-publisher, that it's always in fluctuation. And my rule of thumb, because things are going to change between now and when this podcast actually airs, and a month after that, everything will be different, right? So my rule of thumb that I give people is, if something isn't working, change it. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so if 99 cents is working for you, great. And I always recommend experimenting. And so change it for a little while. And when I say a little while, I don't mean a day or 2 days, change the price maybe for a month and try it out to see what works. I personally have found that, some people can write a novel and it sells really well at $4.99. I've actually found personally the $3.99 price point for my stuff to be a much better seller than the $4.99 price point. And that's just me. It's like every book is its own kind of animal. So, and so you got to play around with it a little bit to find out where your fit is. I don't like 99 cents a lot at all. Mm-hmm. I like it as like a launch strategy. So whenever you release a new book, I love to do 99 cents so that I can give it to my newsletter readers and those kind of like early adopters, those early purchasers. I love giving it to them for 99 cents. Because that's just treating your established base well, making sure that, recognizing that they're the ones that are supporting you, and they're the ones that are spreading the word about your stuff, and giving them an opportunity to get it for the cheapest price possible. So I love launching for the first couple of days at 99 cents, and then I increase it to whatever the normal price point is going to be. If it's a novel, it's going to be between $3.99 and $4.99 personally. If it's a novella, which I also write a lot of novellas, they're just short novels, and if it's a novella, it's probably going to be $2.99.
Do you do the free period first and then increase it to 99 cents, or do you just start at 99 cents now?
Yeah, I started 99 cents, and the free promotions, whenever I use like Amazon Select, I save those because you essentially, whenever you go into Amazon Select, KDP Select, which is Amazon exclusivity, they lock you in for 90 days. So you kind of sign this 90-day contract that you're going to be only on Amazon for 90 days. And I like to manage those free days. I don't like to do them initially. I like to kind of use them strategically more down the line because I write pretty quickly. So I try and publish. Right now I'm publishing novellas, and I'm having a lot of success publishing shorter works. So I'm trying to publish upwards of 2 novellas a month. And so what I like to do is that really just builds a big backlist of stuff that you can kind of play around with. And so I don't do it initially, but I'll do it later on where I'll start running like chains of free books, right? So I'll give away one book for free for 5 days. And then as soon as that 5 days ends, I'll give away another book for 5 days for free, or, whatever the case is. Sure. And there's different strategies there, but I almost always launch at 99 cents. And then the other thing I do, and this is really, really, really big, I can't emphasize this enough, especially to people that are new, is reviews are critical. They're so important. I will give away 10 copies of a book for every 1 review, happily. And so basically what I do is I actually promote that on my newsletter. Almost every single newsletter I send out has a little clip at the end that says, by the way, if you would like free copies of any of my books, I have a special I have like a special newsletter list set up for just people that are willing to review. And basically what they do is they just sign up to that list. And whenever I have a new book that comes out, I send them all free copies. And,
nice.
And yeah, well, a lot of people, some people will say, why are you giving away so many free books? Like those are already, they're fans of yours. They're going to pay for your book. Why are you giving it to them for free? And it's like, 100 or 500 or even 1,000 sales in the grand scheme of things, it isn't much. And if I can get a decent conversion on those reviews up front, that's actually going to help me out on sales algorithms within Amazon way more than any of those individual sales would, especially at 99 cents where you're only making 35 cents on the sale anyways.
Yeah, this has been a lot of good information. I guess before we end the episode, quick question about, do you have any books that you'd recommend? I guess my first question would be books you'd recommend on writing better, like how to actually, the writing process itself, how to write great content.
Yeah, on actually writing better, I would definitely recommend checking out I mentioned earlier, Rachel Aaron's 2K to 10K.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of that book. Another one that's kind of like the unspoken Bible of all fiction writers is Stephen King's On Writing.
I started, so I'm like about halfway through. I kind of got hung up because he talks about like if you were bad at English in high school, like get your act together and like go back and relearn it. And I'm like, oh man, I got to go back and learn grammar again because that is something I'm not great at. But yeah, I agree so far. It seems like a great resource.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So it's like part autobiography, and then he gets into some style at the end. And so he's kind of set in his ways. Don't let him intimidate you and bully you, right? But it's a really great read. So as far as craft goes, I recommend those two. There's probably others, but those are the first two that jump to mind. Also, actually, I'll say on story structure, I really like Blake Snyder's Save the Cat.
Okay,
it's intended. It's a screenplay writing, like a script writing book. But really what it comes back to is it's put through the lens of talking about movies. But really what it's talking about is story structure in general. And so you can apply that to novels it's almost a direct crossover. So I highly, highly recommend that for anyone who's not familiar with story structure.
And what about for marketing books? Do you have any resources that you look at?
Yeah, and so there's a couple others I would like to say. Okay. Nick Stevenson, has recently put out a couple of books, and I'm kind of connected with him through we're a mastermind group together. But he has put out some wonderful, wonderful books about newsletters and getting people on your newsletters and really connecting with readers and doing keywords. We didn't even talk about keywords. Keywords and blurb writing is so important. So he's got 2 books out right now that I highly, highly, highly recommend people check out. The first one is called Supercharge Your Kindle Sales. And the second one is called Reader Magnets. And so it's Nick Stevenson with a PH, Stephenson. Go check out his Amazon page. He's also a very accomplished fiction writer. And then, the kind of nonfiction marketing books that he's put out are really, really strong. And so I would, those are the 2. If I had to say anything about marketing, check those out, because those are going to be some of the ones that you'll see immediate results.
Awesome. All right. Any last advice before I let you go on just general advice for people in their 20s? Anything you'd want to say?
Yeah, it's don't settle. Don't settle for mediocrity. Don't settle for anything you don't want to do. Life is short. Life is shorter than, I think it was in my 20s when I started. That was the first time I started having like important people in my life actually pass away, which is unfortunate. But it lets you see that, you know what? Don't waste your time doing something you don't want to be doing. So if you have a passion, whatever that is, chase it. Like, the money will come and go. You can find out a way to make money and support yourself doing it. But being happy, I think, is the number one thing that I would advise. Whatever it is that you want to do that makes you happy, chase it with everything you can. Don't be afraid. Leap and, build the parachute on the way down type thing.
I love it. That advice. Thank you so much, Matt, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
No problem, Travis. Thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Thanks, guys, for listening to this episode. And you can get the show notes by going to my website, howtodoyour20s.com. That's howtodoyour20s.com. And while you're at the website, you can sign up for free bonus podcasts that I've done that I never released on iTunes. I never released on Stitcher, any of that kind of stuff. The only way to get them is by going to the website and putting your email in the top little box. When you put your email in there, I'll send you a link to all the bonus episodes I've done, including a very special episode that I did that was all about setting and achieving goals. And for this episode, I probably spent about 50 hours just doing research on how to set and achieve goals. And I actually dissected how you can set and achieve better goals. And the stuff that I learned throughout researching this episode has helped me in so many ways. I'm so much more productive now, and it's actually really helped me establish a daily routine that I'm really proud of. So go to howtodoyour20s.com, put your email in that top little box, and I'll send you a link that will not only have that bonus episode, but all future bonus episodes I do, and I'm planning on releasing a new one pretty soon, so I recommend going over there and checking it out. But thank you guys so much for listening to this episode, and remember, I have a new episode for you every Monday, so I hope to talk to you guys again next Monday. Have a great week. And hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, make sure you hit the big red subscribe button down below. You can also check me out on Facebook and on Twitter, and I release a new video every Monday, and by hitting that subscribe button, you'll get those new videos every Monday. And this is really a podcast. It's also a website. You can check out the website. It's howtodoyour20s.com. I'll put a link right over here as well. And what it's all about is trying to improve your life. And we specifically focus on things that people in their 20s are interested in. So make sure you like the video if you liked it. Subscribe. Like us on Facebook and Twitter, whatever. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you again on another video.